Okay, as this is something of an academic occasion itself, I like a certain amount of participation because I'd like you all to ask yourselves the question as I go through my presentation. I'd like to ask you to whether you believe that we've reached a tipping point about the FIFA brand, and therefore also about the FIFA Masters Alumni brand. Of course, we're all here in Brazil at the World Cup. It's the FIFA World Cup, and we're at the FIFA Masters Alumni Seminar. FIFA is a global brand. You are all part of that brand. Many of you have spent money and time to join and become part of that brand. But maybe we should just think back to remember how that brand was built. Back when Brazil last hosted the World Cup in 1950, the world was a very different place. Perhaps the world seemed a lot bigger. But in the early 50s, in fact, from the 50s through to the 70s, FIFA was a very modest organization. It was a very modest brand. I think it's also important that we remember it was also a Brazilian, Dr. João Avalanche, that wanted to change all that. He might have been helped by young Mr. Blatter, but let's not forget that it was João Avalanche's vision that created FIFA, the FIFA we see today. How did it happen? In 1975, as this picture attests, Coca-Cola, my client Coca-Cola, entered into an all-embracing sponsorship agreement, the first agreement of its kind. Before this check, and before Coca-Cola's global marketing muscle, FIFA had very little resources, and it was a relatively unknown brand. We created the FIFA Coca-Cola development program that took the football knowledge from Europe and Asia and passed it to Africa, from South America and Europe and passed it to Africa, to Asia. We also took those knowledges to developing markets like Japan, USA, Australia, and you can see how that development has worked. We developed a youth cup. We created skill programs, kick me, promotional items, all of which was building FIFA awareness. The whole muscle of the Coca-Cola marketing machine in over 130 countries was helping to build that brand. For the World Cup in Argentina, when Coca-Cola wanted to have some involvement, FIFA didn't control its rights. We had to get control of the rights back. We had to get the stadia, the licensing, the signage. To do that, we had to negotiate with a new military junta that had just taken over Argentina. But as they also wanted to promote their image through the World Cup, they agreed. The purchase of those rights was not made by FIFA. The purchase of those rights was made by the Coca-Cola company. Success in Argentina, great success because Argentina won. We had a bigger problem because as part of this expansion program, as we moved to Spain in 1982, 16 teams became 24 teams. 4 stadia became 14 stadia. It required money. It required money. Where was that money going to come from? What we had to do was to create a mega marketing program, which then was called In Soccer 4, to be funded by Coca-Cola, but not just Coca-Cola, but also by other multinational companies. I'd just like to share with you a promotional video that was produced by us some 32 years ago, but still very relevant today.
Three years ago, Nally launched the most persuasive new marketing idea of a decade. Inter Soccer 4. 79 top international football matches, the best of world soccer. Shared by a group of major companies, all household names. A long-term program providing total worldwide product domination across all commercial rights. Up to 4 advertising boards for each company at every match. Repeating a constant identification to a total television audience of 8,000 million in 137 countries. Time to build an image that endures. Time to plan and market the world's greatest sports opportunity on a huge scale, bringing a new professionalism not just to the chosen sport, but to the relationship of companies within that sport. What does it mean? At least 14 minutes fully on screen for each company in every match. The same exposure repeated in 70 or 100 countries. Sophisticated exploitation of soccer's motivating force, its ability to move products. A force which works its magic at every level, with dealers, distributors, customers and company personnel. Canon, one of the Intersoccer 4 companies, increased the sales of its A1 camera range in Europe by 70% during the summer of 1980, through football promotions linked to the European Championship. It reached a specialized target group, professional photographers, through its camera loan and repair services at major soccer events. The chance to experiment, to try a new lens. The companies are also learning to work together in promotions and worldwide publicity programs, using each other's products to sell their own. The first Intersoccer 4 program is still running. So great has been its impact, an impact proved by research, that FIFA, the governing body of world football, and UEFA, organisers of European soccer, have granted West Nally rights for another longer and even more ambitious phase. Intersoccer 4, the second programme, will start in 1983 with the European Cup final, the European Cup Winners' Cup, annual club events, bigger than most world sports events in television terms. It will include the 1984 European Championship, with 8 nations. A new World Cup for women's soccer, again with 8 countries competing. A new Indoor Soccer World Championship with 16 countries. A total of 168 top soccer matches, delivering an estimated television audience of 10,000 million. A program that builds naturally over 4 years towards a glittering highlight, the 1986 World Cup, the biggest single sports event there is. Intersoccer 4 harnesses the sport with the power, to the companies who can use its competitive advantage. If the medium is the message, it has to be the best.
So that's how it all started. And that blueprint that we created all those years ago is still more or less the blueprint for the sports business today. The programme, as it relates to FIFA World Cup over the next 4-year cycle, will generate some 2.5 billion to help promote that FIFA brand. Also interesting to note that many of those sponsors that started that programme are still with FIFA supporting it today. That was then. Now we are here. But lots of things have changed, unlike that programme in the intervening years. Global television, we've seen the digital developments and success. Social media, from a personal perspective, I'm enjoying this World Cup through Twitter. Technology has been totally revolutionised. You can actually see live hologram projections in stadia 100 and thousands of miles away from an event to where an event is taking place. We've seen also some extraordinary development of some amazing football facilities and some even more extraordinary Premier Leagues. So we have, over all of these years, seen a very, very changing face of sport. Sport, as we've heard today, is a very major event that plays a bigger part in our lives thanks to the media it brings to us all. As we've seen, politicians, they look at World Cups, they look at Olympic Games and other mega events as important, critical and nation-branding, kudos-associated events to be warmly hosted. So sport is more powerful than ever before in society, with education, health, commerce, technology, media, culture. We can't question the changing face of sport. But there has to be a but. Events are getting bigger and more expensive. What does it mean? Fewer and fewer cities, regions and nations will ever be given the opportunity to host them. Qatar is the first Arab state to host the World Cup, but currently it's embroiled in accusations of corruption, in migrant worker exploitation, and apparently is investing in many state-of-the-art stadia for limited use. We have an African legacy. South Africa saw the hosting of the 2010 World Cup, 1 billion invested, new stadia, and as you will see, some of them now never being used. We've seen social concerns. Here we are in Brazil. We have seen the social concerns. We're now facing up to the experience that sport is under pressure because of all this money from so many other areas. We have the scandals in doping. We have now the concerns of match fixing. We have the concerns of corruption. And as from this World Cup, we now have the concerns about fighting. If you add to this, we also have got to look about the changing needs of brands. These brands that have provided this substantial amount of finance and muscle. There's a new way for brand building today, because they have seen the change of time. It's not about exposure. Back in the early days, it was about brand exposure. Today, it's about reputation. Reputation is what is important to a brand, and reputations can be positive or negative by association. Is the FIFA image still positive? It was built by sponsors, but will it be rejected by sponsors? I want to stress that a good name is becoming everything. A study carried out by a PR firm in my country called Alumni concluded that given comparative price and quality, today's consumers are likely to make their purchasing choice based on brand reputation, often based on positive social involvement, on brand reputation. How many thought this? More than 70% will be swayed by brand reputation. Even if you drastically discount this figure to 10%, it represents an extraordinary commercial impact to a brand. For instance, a 10% swing in a share change in a particular brand, like in the motor industry, would see General Motors immediately take over from Toyota. Something a company must be very consciously aware of is brand reputation. You would think that sport and brands that there wouldn't be a disconnect, because sport offers so many opportunities. It helps brands build positive reputations. The relationship between sport and brands should be sweeter now than at any other time. Sport should be the solution to so many marketeers' problems. It does, of course, provide a unique level of connection and engagement through shared passion. We can see, as I've seen with Twitter, that sport is the hub of social media. All of the soccer stars are now obviously accessible and followed avidly by tweets. So, as brands look to build credibility and awareness, should they be doing it through their own content, or can sport still have that central role to play? If we add to this, we have to look at the concerns in terms of major events. There's a reputation challenge now appearing on major events. As I've mentioned, we've seen huge costs. Misunderstandings of those costs lead to civil disobedience. We've seen recently the bidding issues and allegations of corruption around the 2012 Russian bid, the 2022 Qatar bid, all of it unwarranted scrutiny on FIFA and on the sport itself. There is no question that we are getting more and more concerns related to the white elephants, the unsustainable legacy programs that haunted too many events, Greece, even Beijing. Sponsors are now also beginning to be concerned about these integrity questions, about the brand reputation. It's important that we don't misunderstand that brand reputation is of critical importance. So I ask you, are we reaching a tipping point? Are we about to see the nature of the relationship between sport and brands change significantly? Brands need to be seen to be associated with positive properties, initiatives, to enjoy that halo effect. Spending billions to support projects which are unpopular and lead to violence on the streets is not good for brand reputation. Sporting bodies suspected of being corrupt, non-transparent, it's not good for brand reputation. So it is my view that there has to be a change in the way that sport operates and in how it relates to stakeholders' interests. Without change, there is a possibility that brands may eventually melt away and take other paths opened up now by technology. Again, an English phrase, he who pays the piper calls the tune. That's probably never been more apt than it is today. I believe that brands, in their own interests, will ultimately start to use their financial power to come closer to the centre of sport, to ensure it is governed, administered, in a way that reflects their brand image and ambitions. After all, that is what they pay for. But we can't do it in a haphazard way. There's no point just criticising. There's no point the media just making statements. We need a new way. There has to be a plan. The plan has to be developed. And like any plans, we need to talk. We need to decide who can contribute to that plan. One group that has come forward that may help to galvanise this moment is Unesco and UNEP's, the ministers' meetings. Unesco, which is the United Nations Education, Science and Culture Organisation, was set up in 1945 following the two world wars. It has 195 member states. It is the UN's highest membership system. Its role is to build networks amongst nations. It's probably better known for its mobilising of education, its work in cultural diversity, its heritage projects. However, UNESCO, like other UN agencies, have now recognised the important role of sport. It is often known as the intellectual agency, the agency of the UN, that when the world is looking for new ways to build peace and sustainable development, people must rely on the power of intelligence to innovate, expand their horizons, debate and to discuss. So, if we're going to manage sport correctly, protect the sport that we love, that we adore, perhaps we should copy and adapt this approach. The first UNEP's meeting was in Paris in 1976, which was created then to facilitate intellectual exchange in the field of physical education and sport. But last year, at this Berlin conference, there was other key recommendations made in the declaration following. All the governments believe that access to sport is a fundamental right. They all believe that access for women and girls is a fundamental right. They all believe that we should promote investment into sport and physical education. But what they also think is that we need to review sport mega events and how they are bid and sustained. They equally believe that we should preserve the integrity of sport with a commitment to the values of sport, fight against match fixing, illegal betting, doping and corruption in sport. What they believe in is a discussion, debate and a plan that can protect the brand and maintain and improve that brand reputation. The important thing, however, is that we need in that debate everybody that is a stakeholder. We need sport accords. We need the academic institutions like Harvard that agree to participate. We need to involve brands. We need to involve media. We need to involve athletes. And of course, the important thing is this debate shouldn't only be conducted for the IOC and for FIFA. It really needs to have all of those stakeholders, those that are concerned about brand reputation, being part of that debate. So, my question is, do you believe that we could be reaching a tipping point for the brand? This is a brand that is your brand. You are stakeholders. You have invested money, time, energy to become associated with the brand. I believe we have a responsibility to join the debate and become a stakeholder. Thank you.